Hello and welcome to episode 22 of the Mad Madam Mel podcast. This is a little show where I talk about my knitting and crafting pursuits and what I've been up to recently. So, like I said, I'm on to episode 22. Wow, this has come around quite quickly, but we're doing well. If you watched the last episode, you'll see I had quite a few sweaters on the needles and none of them finished, but I have one knitting finished object this week and two sewing finished objects also, as well as several autumnal cast-ons, I'm afraid, even though I still have unfinished objects on the needles, nearly finished. Okay, my first finished object, well actually two of my finished objects I'm actually wearing today. I'm wearing a sewing finished object, which I will show you a little later on, and I'm also wearing a yarny knitting finished object too. The first finished object to show you is the Hetty Cardigan, which is a 3/4 sleeve cardigan, and I will stand up and show you it a little in a moment. But as I said, it's a 3/4 sleeve, Aran weight, vintage shaped lace cardigan. So I will show you what that looks like first. Okay, as you can see, it is not quite cropped, but it's relatively short. My hip crease is here, so it stops just a little bit short, and the rib starts right on the waistline here. It is supposed to be knit with negative ease, but I've knit it pretty much spot on size wise because I don't really do negative ease, but at the same time I didn't want it to be oversized. I would maybe say it's maybe it's a little bit of positive ease, but not enough to make it hang straight. It definitely hugs the curves, which is perfect. It has 3/4 sleeves, as you can see, and the lace pattern is all over as well, which is really nice. So I will sit back down and tell you a little bit more about the pattern. Okay, so the design is by Andy de Satterland, and I love pretty much all of her designs. I think this is the third of her garments that I've actually knit now. The original pattern is this one, which mine looks pretty much spot on as to what it is, and it is knit with an Aran weight, like I said, and I knit this on a 5mm needle, which is what the pattern called for. My gauge was spot on. I'm not sure on the previous garments that I made. No, probably not. The previous ones I made, I changed the gauge because I changed the yarn, but for this I knit the Aran weight yarn, which is what it calls for, and I knit it with the needle size called for because my gauge was exactly as it should be, which is 15 stitches, 24 rows per 4 inches, which was perfect. And I knit this in Drops Alpaca in the colour, I do have a label to hand, in the Colorway 11, which is basically, it's red. And there is not much I changed on this, which is unusual for me. The one thing I really did change was the rib. The rib on the button band was supposed to be 2x2 rib, and I did 1x1 rib, which mirrors the 1x1 rib on the cuffs and on the bottom of the cardigan. That's the only real design change that I made. I just thought it looked more in keeping with the rest of the cardigan. The 2x2 rib on the Aran I just wasn't too keen on it. The only other things weren't really design changes, but I did one more pattern repeat of the lace before I did the bottom rib to account for where my waistline is, because my waist was a bit too low to stop at that point. It would make the cardigan not sit quite right. And I did one less pattern repeat, lace repeat on the sleeves. Again, that's just personal preference on the sleeve length. I wanted them at this length rather than further down my arm, and other than that I kept the pattern as it was stated, other than this 1x1 rib on the button band. I've used some little wooden buttons, which are probably not going to focus with my facing shot. Little wooden buttons, might focus, there. I did, because I changed the rib on the button band, instead of, I did a, how did I do? I did a 1 stitch yarn over for the buttonholes on the other side. And I decided to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 buttons, and I think the pattern called for 7, but I'm not entirely sure. I just chose my buttons, laid them out how I wanted them, and decided, oh, I think I'll have 6 because I want certain button to fit just under the bust, and made the buttonholes to correspond accordingly. Really happy with it. It's really comfortable. It fits perfect, and I'm really happy with it. And I may have to knit another one at some point in another colour. Maybe a black one, because that would just go with everything then. And it knit up really fast, so I can highly recommend this pattern. Okay, I know I said I had 2 sewing finish objects, but I'm going to do all the sewing projects after the yarn projects, I think. It'll just make it a little bit easier. So we'll get on to whips now. No, I'm not going to show this one. I'm going to show a different one first. The first whip I'm going to show is one that should have been finished, but isn't, because I ran out of yarn. Last time on the podcast, I showed the Red Currant tee by Ellie of Skein Deer, and I had knit part of the body. I had knit about 6 inches of the body, and I thought I would have enough yarn, but I didn't. I've run out twice. It's using a lot of yarn, but I am nearly finished it now. But I have made quite a big change on it. The yarn I'm using, the yarn she calls for is a fingering weight linen yarn held double. But it's quite cold in Orkney most of the year. Not really warm enough for linen at all, unless it's July, and that's the only time. So instead I am knitting with this yarn, which I'm not sure if it will focus. It is Bamboo Soft by Sheepy's Yarn. I'll just try and get it to focus. There we go, in the colourway Deep Cherry, which is colour 251. And I'm holding it double like the pattern states. Now, this is thicker than a linen yarn and heavier, but I'm still holding it double. The needles I'm knitting it on is a 6mm needle, which is slightly different than the pattern originally stated. The pattern originally called for 5mm needles to get a gauge of 16 stitches and 26 rounds. And I'm knitting it on a 6mm needle to get 16 stitches and 22 rounds. So my length, I'm obviously having to account for that ever so slightly, but then I actually got gauge with that needle size. It's quite heavy, because cotton is quite heavy. But that's fine, it just means it will get more wear. I can wear it all year round. And actually it doesn't feel that heavy when you actually try it on. I'm almost done. I'm just making sure I'm not going to drop this off the needles, but I'm not. I've got stops on it, it's fine. And it's not very easy to show because it's drapey with it being cotton. As you can see, it's just a big floppy mess, which looks bigger than it is, because it has big puffy sleeves. So if I was to gather this bit up, it gathers at the top, and as you can see, it's got nice poofy sleeves, and it's also got raglan shaping. It is knit bottom up, which I almost never do. I'm not a huge fan of bottom up. I like a top down, so you can try a garment on and adjust the length and fit as you go. Big major change I made with this. Now, I bought it as part of Ellie's summer collection, so I bought the set of all 4 patterns that she released in one kind of booklet, not a booklet, but a set. and there was 2 patterns in there that I couldn't decide which one to knit out of this yarn. The original one that I started with the big poofy sleeves is this one, the red currant, which is it is what I'm knitting. It has a folded hem, folded stockinette hem and nice poofy sleeves, but it has quite a high neckline, which is okay I suppose, but with a more summery top that's not really what I wanted, or I wasn't sure that's what I wanted. My other option, my second choice was my second choice was one of the others in the collection, which is the Orkney tee, which again is a summer top. It has smaller capped sleeves, ever so slightly poofy just on the top, which is not going to show, a little bit poofy, but much shorter and less billowy sleeves, but it has a sweetheart neckline. So I looked at the gauge for it, and the gauge is slightly different. It's 15 stitch gauge, but I can work with that. So what I decided to do was, when it got to the point in the patterns where they kind of met up with each other, I switched from doing the red currant neckline to the Orkney neckline, and just carried on knitting the red currant the same for the rest of the garment, but with the Orkney neckline instead. So basically kept an eye on what the sleeves were doing, but I'm knitting the Orkney top part. So I'm combining the two. So I will have a nice poofy sleeved top, but with the sweetheart neckline, which I think is going to be fine. And I'm almost done this. I had to buy yarn twice. I knew I was running out, so I bought 2 more balls and carried on knitting and realised, no, I'm going to run out again. So I've had to buy 2 more balls, and I had to wait for those to arrive, which is why I haven't finished this. But next time you see this, this will be done, because this is really lovely yarn. The sheepish yarn can often be a little on the thinner side, but this is really, really nice. And I'm not a fan of knitting with cotton. It's hard on the hands and what have you, but this does not feel like knitting cotton at all. And I've knit and crocheted with cotton before in the past and detested every minute of it, but this is just like knitting yarn. Now, the bamboo is a vegetable fibre and doesn't stretch like yarn, like wool does, but there's something obviously in it that's just enough to make this have a little bit of give. And it's soft. It feels like, I don't even know what it feels like. It's very nice, and so I can highly recommend this if you wanted to knit something with cotton, other than dishcloths obviously, but if you wanted to knit something with cotton, this is a nice yarn. And it's 50-50 bamboo cotton, so it's just as cool as cotton, possibly even more so, but it's got some nicer colours, got some richer colours, not just the pastels, and yeah, I highly recommend that. Okay, we're into new cast-ons, and it's that time of year when I want to cast on everything. We're into autumn and Halloween. Well, I like knitting themed things, so you know, seasonal things, autumnal themed, Halloween themed, Christmas themed, you get the idea. And today is the 31st of August, which in Orkney means it's autumn, because autumn arrives show week, which is the first, second week August. So we're into, once show week comes, the weather turns rubbish, and we have autumn weather. We get some nice days, but it's autumn now. So it means autumn knitwear. Now this has been in my queue for a while, and I don't think I'd started this last time on the podcast. So it'll be new to show, and I know the other one is new to show. I've had all the yarn ready, and I think I've shown on the podcast that I was going to knit it, but not actually started it. So I'm going to try and show this without showing the pattern. And it is the Witching Hour Swan Shawl. And as you can see, it's a colourwork swan shawl, sweater poncho. I don't do swan shawls. It's knit in a DK weight, supposed to be, and makes this swan shawl style, which means the armpits come to near enough your elbows, and it's just not practical at all for me. So instead I'm knitting it fingering weight, and I will knit the yoke and then turn it into a sweater, because the yoke will be shorter and I can separate for the sleeves earlier. So that's what I'm doing. I'm knitting this in 2 of my own yarns, and I have done a big, they look like smiley faces. I've done a big chunk of the yoke, as you can see, and I'm just, you can just see that, just starting the skull shape on the pattern, which, as you can see here, has got, if you hadn't noticed, bird skulls. It's not going to focus. There, it has bird skulls in the design, which I think is brilliant. So I have only just reached the point of where the skulls here are just starting to appear, just the top bits. This is all the patterning at the top above those. I'm knitting this in, like I said, 2 of my own yarns. The purple is 100% non-superwash BFL in Spellbound, and the background colour is 100% non-superwash Shetland in Oatmeal, and the colours look perfect together. The rest of the sweater, once I've knit the yoke, will be in the Spellbound purple as well, and it's lightweight, super lightweight, complete contrast to the cotton top. It's going to weigh next to nothing, which is fabulous, but at the same time will be very warm, because Shetland and BFL are rustic, quite rustic yarns, and they're very woolly and very warm. BFL isn't as woolly, as rustic as the Shetland. Shetland, I'm okay with Shetland. I find it can be a little itchy for me when I have a very, very princess neck. Very princess neck. BFL I find comfortable. Shetland is okay after a few minutes, but never wear when you're feeling damp or sweaty, or if the air's moist, or if it rains, because then it'll just itch me. But I think it'll be fine in the yoke, and the BFL at the collar will certainly be fine for me. It's one of my favourite bases is BFL. I would choose BFL almost over any other yarn base for almost anything. Socks, BFL. Sweaters, BFL. It doesn't pill like merino, and it's more hard wearing than merino for socks, which is perfect. So I'm cracking on with that. It takes a little bit more concentration, obviously, than just, say, stockinette. So when I'm not too tired, this is one of the colour work yokes I'm working on, because it is not the only one. Which leads me on to my second cast on since you last spoke to me. It's going to be fun showing you this dress at the end, because I've been putting project bags on my lap, and my black dress is now covered in red fuzz and cat hairs off my project bags. Why would I choose black when I have fibres everywhere, and one of my cats is pale grey and beige? My black cat doesn't show on it, but you know. Okay, my final cast on that I'm going to show in this episode, because it's not worth showing a pair of socks when they've only just been cast on. My final cast on is going to put even more fuzz all over this new black dress that I sewed, because it is 100% alpaca, which gets everywhere. Okay, my second new cast on is the Red Moon sweater by Born and Raised Knits, which is another colourwork yoke sweater. I'm all about the colourwork yoke sweaters over the autumn and winter months. I have two more planned to cast on in the next couple of weeks. Few weeks. So as you can see, it is a, well, on the photo it shows it as a short sleeve sweater, but you have the option, and there are colourwork charts for the sleeves as well. I don't think I'll be doing colourwork on the sleeves, although I'm tempted because there is charts for just putting colourwork on the cuffs, which I might do. This one I am knitting with 100% drops alpaca, and I'm knitting it in Halloweeny colours. I'm knitting it in anthracite. I don't know if it's anthracite or charcoal, and orange mix, I believe. Let me check. It doesn't say, but it's either burnt orange mix or orange mix. 100% alpaca, and the dark grey charcoal or anthracite. I think in some places it's charcoal, in other places it's anthracite. And as you can see, it's looking fabulous. Like I said, it's 100% alpaca, so this is going to be really warm, really light, and it's very, very soft. I love alpaca. I really, really do. I don't find it particularly itchy. It's particularly when you're knitting with it, but I find it very, very snuggly. I have a cardigan I knit last autumn in this orange. This is using up what I have left over basically, but I knit an entire cardigan held double with this orange last autumn, an Andy Satterland one, which was the Ichabod cardigan, and I love 100% alpaca. It's so soft and snuggly. So yep, I have just knit the first colourwork chart, which has got all the little crescents and little moons, and I'm just about to start the second chart, which is the large moon phases at the bottom here, and I'll be knitting it with sleeves, probably full length sleeves. I'm not sure on length yet, maybe hip length, maybe a little longer, depends on which yarn I've got. I'd like to use it up, so I'll probably get the yoke knit, and I don't know if I'll knit the sleeves before the body yet, but we shall see. The only change I've made on it so far is it has a garter neckband, garter stitch neckband, and it's very large and quite an open neckline, and other people's projects on Ravelry also show it is very open neckline, and I just couldn't see how I could wear it very well during the cooler months. Like it would, I just wasn't sure how it would fit into my wardrobe very well. So instead of doing a garter neckband, I actually just did a few rows of 1x1 rib at the top where the garter band was, basically in place of it, and then just carried on knitting the sweater as per the instructions. So yep, that's my final cast on to show this episode. Hi, this is future editing Mel, putting in a bit of footage because I forgot to press the record button on this next section. Oops. There is a small bit here that I didn't record, which basically is telling you that I made the wren dress from Colette Patterns, and most of it will be coming up, and I will then go into the standing up portion where I show you the actual dress, which I hadn't realised just how badly covered in alpaca and fuzz it was, so apologies for that too. Anyway, bye from future Mel and back to past Mel. Okay, so I've made this pattern once before and I've tweaked it slightly to fit better. It is a wrap dress with an attached skirt, so it does have like, it's not all in one piece, it has separate bodice pieces. I've raised the back, so I took a good inch and a half out of the length of the bodice in the back of the dress, and I lengthened the front bodice by an inch as well, although to be honest it probably could have done with another half an inch, but it's not too bad. I've come to the conclusion I'm not the biggest fan of wrap dresses, but we'll come to that later. So, and all I did was I've just pleated the skirt rather than gathered it. I put pleats in the back, well, all the way around, especially towards the sides. The dress actually calls for gathers, but I've actually kind of rough pleated it. I didn't measure them, I just kind of roughly got them where I wanted them to be. And it has these gathers, at the top of the shoulder, which is really, really nice. But like I says, I'm kind of going to veer away from wrap dresses in future, because although it fits nice and if it's covered in fluff on camera, I do apologise for the alpaca everywhere. I think It's okay, but I think I prefer a princess seam dress. Okay, I've sat back down now. So what else did I change? Well, the dress has two versions. There are two views. There is a more fitted view and a more billowy skirt view with sleeves, with kind of short sleeves, whereas the fitted one is more of a shift dress without sleeves. So the first version I did was pretty much as version 2 goes. So it had a lot more fabric in the skirt and it had short sleeves. This one, instead, what I did was I omitted the sleeves, as you saw, basically doing the top half of version 1. But what I did was, when I came to do the skirt, is I used the smallest size of skirt to fit onto my sized. I used the smallest size of skirt to fit onto my size of the bodice because I didn't want as much fabric in the skirt. And then, like I said, instead of gathering it, I just made little pleats, which I had to do twice because I messed them up the first time. And I omitted the sleeves because, first of all, I didn't think I had enough fabric. Secondly, didn't see much point, to be perfectly honest. It's the type of dress I would wear under a cardigan, so the less bulk on the arms, preferably. I've used quite a heavyweight cotton jersey with, I think it has 5% spandex in it, elastane spandex in it, but I couldn't 100% certain. I think it's 5%, I don't think it's as high as 8, which gives it plenty of stretch, and it's not too, it has plenty of stretch and it's not too thin and what have you. It's a nice heavyweight jersey cotton, so hopefully it'll last quite well. My sewing machine does not like stretch fabric, so I'm not the biggest fan of sewing it, and I had a lot of trouble attaching the skirt to the bodice. It just does not like it. Like I said, I don't know if I'll make another one of these. I've made 2 now, and the bodice doesn't fit great. I mean, it fits, but I feel like it's just a bit in your face a little bit, and not in a good way. I just don't feel overly comfortable in it. It works quite well. It doesn't gape. A lot of crossover dresses tend to gape a bit, and I end up stitching down the top layer onto the other, on the diagonal, to keep them in place. But this actually holds up really well, which I'm pleased with. I also cut off around several inches off the bottom of the length because I am a shrimp, and I've made it fall just above the knee, which is my preferred length of dress. In my second sewing finished object and final finished object for this episode is another dress, and I will have to insert photos somewhere up here of the finished object that I wore a few weeks ago when I was visiting my mum over the water. And it is this dress, which is the Magnolia dress from Deer and Doe. Ignore the lines, my printer was playing up. And I have done the long dress, but I have used the less plunging neckline of the short version for the bodice. And I made shorter sleeves because I was very short on fabric for the sleeves. They could do with an extra couple of inches. So what I'm going to plan on doing is unpicking the hem on the bottom of the sleeves and making some kind of cuffs to stitch onto the end instead, just give me a little bit more length, because when I was wearing them I found they were riding up a little bit to my elbow, and I'd rather they were just that little bit longer. The fit was really nice. I had to cut off a huge amount of length off the bottom because, yet again, I'm a shrimp, but that to give me extra fabric that I needed for the rest of the dress. I used a cotton poplin for this. I've not used poplin to make a dress before, and it surprised me just how, you know, sturdy and warm a fabric is, which means it's going to get more use later in the year as well. Although obviously how many places can you wear a long dress when it's blowing a hoolie outside? But it means that it's not just a summer dress, it can be worn on other occasions as well. So I think if I did another summer dress, that was specifically summery, I would maybe go for a lawn instead, or something just a little bit more lightweight, because the poplin is quite not thick, but it's not, certainly not airy by any stretch of imagination. The pattern itself I thought was well written. Definitely not for beginner, but it's well written, but the size range is not ideal. I hadn't realised when I purchased the pattern that the largest size on this goes up to a finished bust measurement of 48 inches, which is only slightly larger than my bust measurement. The dress itself fit, and it fit fine, but there's no room to play with that at all. And if it had been any smaller, I would have had to grade it myself. So although the dress is fab, the size range could certainly be better on the deer and doe. Whereas the Colette, this one goes up to a finished bust measurement of 40¼ inches. Now, this is one of their older patterns, and that was that was the size then, but the Colette patterns now, you can actually get them in 2 sizes, and the secondary size being much bigger. And I think the other dress that I made of the Colette, I was using the smallest size. I used the larger of the 2 versions, and I used the smaller size for myself. So the size range is much better with the Colette patterns than the deer and doe. Okay, so that's it for the knitting and sewing part for this episode. I think all there is to wrap up with is to anybody who pre-ordered the Haste You Back mini skein collection from Perth Yarn Festival, thank you, and your yarn collections should be winging their way, if not today, then certainly in the next few days. So that's excellent, and thank you for purchasing and pre-ordering. Also, I wanted to show a few of the colourways I've got coming up for my shop update this Friday evening, so that will be the 3rd of September. So if you want to see those, then stick around, otherwise toodly pip. So I've got some lovely one-of-a-kinds coming up. I have these fabulous plummy colours, because I love plummy colours in the autumn. This sort of September time, I think I'm taking some plum crumbles and things like that. So plummy tones are really kind of like autumnal food type for me before it gets to the kind of Halloweeny time. So I have some plummy tones. I also have some, if pumpkin spice and such like is more a thing, I have some pumpkin-y colours coming up, and these are my acid dyed ones as opposed to the natural dyed. So yeah, we've got those coming. And if you're more a fiery person, I've also got some golden kind of like maple leaf. We've got some gold kind of maple leaf colours coming up too. Yes, not just oranges, nope. And also got more of the kind of green turning into autumn colours coming up as well. I'm just basically I'm going to be putting quite a few one-of-a-kind skeins in this week. So if you see them and like them, now's the time to get them, because I can't guarantee they will be the same because I've been playing with different colourways, and yeah, so there we go. So I think that's it for this episode. Thank you for sticking and watching to the end. Feel free to hit the like and subscribe down below here, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye.